All right, everybody, welcome back. This is episode 10 of our marathon. This is the DAFT Student Symposium, Media Student Symposium. This is the sixth year we've done it, and it's really been a success. This is the first year not in person. Normally, over here at Motion Picture Institute, right next door in the stage, there's about 160, 170 people going through different classes. So this year weren't able to do that, but we thought these sessions would work out really well. We are joined right now by about 48 students that are going to be chiming in and feeling free to answer questions in the chat. And I'll be saving those questions as well. So again, if you're a student and you don't mind adding to your name what school district you're at, that's always cool, but you do not have to. And we're just going to keep your video off just for bandwidth purposes. But if you feel like asking a question, I might call you out and just say, hey, do you want to ask your question, Bill? Feel free to turn on your video and ask Josh a question. So this session is about documentaries. And I'm joined by Josh Baer, who's one of my former students at West Bloomfield High School, and he's out in LA. You're in LA right now, Josh?
I'm actually in Michigan
You're
now.
in
And
Michigan. Okay, everybody's everywhere there. Yeah. And
yeah,
okay, and we're also going to be joined by Doug Blush. And Josh and Doug did not know. They just found out they were both DAFT alum. Kind of happenstance, right? You guys just
yeah,
you started working together first. Is that right?
yeah. But they only hire Michiganders,
Oh,
so
is that
I
right?
lucked out in that regard. And then we backtracked and figured out the history. But
Okay.
that was kind of my in with them.
Okay, cool. Well,
Yeah,
if you don't mind, can you kind of share your path after high school and how you ended up where you are and what you're doing?
yeah. So after high school, I went to the University of Michigan and was in their Screen Arts and Cultures program. And I did not know at that point that I wanted to work on documentaries. I actually did a lot of experimental films in college, which is a difficult. It's difficult to market. So I moved out to Los Angeles a few years after college and wasn't entirely sure. I kind of had been doing a lot of editing in Michigan, freelance editing, not so much documentary. And just within a few months of moving to Los Angeles, I met Doug Blush, and he asked me if I wanted to do camera work for a documentary called The S Word, which is about suicide attempt survivors kind of overcoming and banding together to like form a movement basically to inspire hope. And I did some shooting for them, and then they asked me if I wanted to edit together a grant piece to get funding, and I did that. And within a few months, they asked me if I wanted to edit the film, so I did that with them. And we've basically just been working together ever since then. We did recently a project called Console Wars that's on CBS All Access about the 90s video game rivalry between Nintendo and Sega. And we just finished one called Rock Camp that Doug actually directed about rock and roll fantasy camp. So it's been a large range of subjects that we've done. And I'm not sure if I'm allowed to talk about the one I'm working on now, but that one is very exciting as well. So yeah, I guess that's the basic rundown.
Yeah. So, what would your we've got I think probably since you got out of high school, there's really been a movement toward documentaries, and I guess a lot of it has to do with the streaming services. Would you agree that that's been a nice outlet for those?
Totally. No, I mean, I feel like it's gone from something that it feels like very few people watch to something almost everyone I know regularly
Hmm.
watches. They've become a lot more commercial. Um, Even though a lot of them still aren't in theaters, I think that people's eyes are on them much more than they were even 5 years ago.
Yeah, I think Fahrenheit 9/11 was such a game changer for a lot of people
Right.
because it was the first movie, I think, first documentary to break $100 million or something like that. But
Yeah.
and I think it became, I think a lot of people realized documentaries weren't just like National Geographic episodes, but they could actually be editorials where, this is somebody who's actually got a point of view. Michael Moore is going to be the first one to say this isn't objective. This is subjective. This is me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What would you, for the S word, which I saw and you did a great job on that. I was really impressed by it when you guys had it here in Michigan. Um, when you're dealing with such a difficult subject like suicide, and you're the editor,
Hmm.
and you've got to go through all that footage. What's it like compared to editing a regular film? Is it really taxing more than
It,
usual?
it was emotionally taxing, and it's interesting because I feel like to survive mental health wise, you almost need to kind of compartmentalize a little so you aren't just like devastated on a day-to-day basis, but then also still be tapped into the emotions so you can tap into that and edit the sequence. So I think that was a very tricky balance. That was the most emotionally difficult movie I've ever had to edit.
Hmm.
But I think part of our challenge was it's like you go into a documentary about suicide expecting it to be kind of grim, and it's not like we wanted to make a super happy movie, but we kind of wanted to have a lot of elements that were more surprising. So there's a lot of, there's like people playing with their kids and like arguments at home and like a lot of animals in it and pets. And I feel like there were a lot of, we tried to like inject as much humor into it as possible. And
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and I saw that also in Of Two Minds.
Mhm.
That that was obviously an important project for Doug and his wife, and so I think that's an interesting thing where you've got this comedy element, and I think as an English teacher forever, um, that fine line between tragedy comedy is something
Right.
that Shakespeare lived off of.
Mhm.
And I think that when you see Michael Moore or people like that, it's got that certain spin on it that that's interesting about how you can take a topic and make it very powerful, but at the same time make people uh, sit through it without walking out or anything like that.
Yeah, it's injecting all the light and the dark and just getting that balance right because you want to humanize the characters, and a great way to do that is through humor. And then ultimately, when you care about them, there's the devastating parts of the film as well. But it's like, how many times in a movie do you really want to try to make people cry? Like, you really get like maybe two or three chances to do that in a film. And
Right,
any more than that, you might get diminishing returns, even if the individual moments are all amazing.
right. Well, if any of you have any questions about documentaries, feel free to pop it in there. I know we've got quite a few excellent documentaries that came out at last year's film festival. And so I know that Doug had mentioned in his email that you guys had some things you wanted to share. Did you want to do that now, or you want to wait till he gets here for that?
So he has the link. So I hope that he signs on because we have a we have a great clip from Console Wars that I think he has on standby.
Okay. What was, probably the toughest thing for you? I mean, do you like doing editing more than photography, or is it kind of a blend? Directing do you have a certain thing that you've gravitated toward more than you used to?
I think I've really fallen in love with documentary editing because it's basically like screenwriting, but I feel like lately I've really loved writing through the editing process because it's just real. It feels so much more real to me, and I love the challenge of getting footage and it's kind of a mess, and then you structure it into a story, but you want to do it in a way that feels real to the footage and authentic as opposed to kind of having an agenda and like making it into something it's not. So I think I've fallen in love with it. It is a lot of time in the chair,
Yeah.
and I love having I love filming too. I think editing I might be in love with like a little more as a craft. Like I feel like it's so close to the storytelling, but I mean, you need to get great clips to do the visual storytelling as well. So
Right.
when I'm filming, I'm thinking like I'm in the editing chair, like what I'll want when I'm shooting. And I love doing that too.
Cool. What have you? I know you're. Is this Mad Pix? Is that Doug's company that you work with or for? Is that it?
It is. And it's kind of, I feel like it's become this like spider web of he knows so many people.
Yeah.
So a lot of the projects we do aren't technically Mad Picks. The ones that he's directing are,
Hmm.
but that's Doug's company. But a lot of the projects we work on are with other directors as well.
Okay, cool. Does anyone out there have any questions for Josh about documentary work or moving to LA or I mean, it's the whole path out there is pretty amazing, I think. I mean, is it true? So many people say you just have to get out there and
I think so.
be on hand, basically, right?
Yeah, I think I mean, I got very lucky. I met Lisa and Doug very quickly, but I think when I met them before even seeing their films, I could just tell that they were authentic people. And I think it's just kind of connecting with people who are on a similar creative wavelength to you and then figuring out some way to sustain yourself financially.
Right.
And it's tough to do that.
Sorry, just knocked over my microphone. I'm surprised I waited this long to do that. Uh, do you want to, can I pull up a trailer of the S Word? Is that all right?
Yeah, of course.
Um, and then if people have other questions, we can do that too. But I always like having people look at their footage. Sorry, my phone's ringing too. All right, let me pull this up. All right, does this look right?
That may be the old one. I'll know better though when you press play.
All right, we shall see. Here we go.
Suicide, that's a really scary word, isn't it?
The old one.
Is that the old one?
Yeah.
Okay, you want me to look for a more recent one?
Yeah, I could try to find it too.
Okay, or if you want to just drop the link in the chat, that way people can have it, and
Sure, yeah.
I can just.
That one was before we had filmed 75% of the film.
And Oliver, do you want to ask your question? I see you just typed something in.
Yeah, so is filming people when you're making a documentary, is it a little like awkward and challenging sometimes? Because these people are having like very raw, emotional like truths being told. Is that ever like hard to film?
It can be. And I think sometimes the biggest challenge is like you want to kind of be there in the room with them almost like as a friend, but you don't want to talk all over the footage. So it's this tricky dance between kind of being a fly on the wall and just like capturing them without inserting yourself into the footage, and also like making them feel kind of trusted, like you are not there to exploit them. And that, I think that's the trickiest thing sometimes, is just like knowing when to talk and when not to talk, because you're kind of bonding with them at the same time as like capturing the film.
Cool. Well, if you want to send me that link, I can play up the trailer. And meanwhile, Dick, if you want to ask your question too, go ahead. Or
Hi, Josh.
Hi.
I really enjoy, the documentaries that Doug and you were doing. And I just watched the trailer for Rock Camp, and the pace of it was just extraordinary. And I'm wondering if it was just the material lends itself to the editing style and the pace. Because the suicide one is, a little slower.
Sure, yeah. Very, very different kind of a film. They actually, I think they had another editor do that trailer, and I just watched it for the first time a few days ago and was kind of blown away. I think it's a really fun film. But agreed, definitely very different from Suicide.
Yeah.
One other question is, with all the interviews that you do, are they all transcribed prior to your beginning editing? And do you look over the transcripts as well?
Ideally, I'm always kind of a strong advocate, even when I have a transcript, of like watching the whole interview, because I feel like sometimes something will look great on paper and not sound great in like when you're listening to it back, and vice versa, like something may not look great on paper, but the way it's kind of delivered may like have an emotion that isn't there on the page. But transcripts are really useful for like if you are, for exposition, trying to get someone to say like, I went to the store yesterday, and you're finding like you're basically building it word for word from like other sentences, that's when a transcript can be really, really useful. But sometimes we don't have them and we just have to string out the whole interview and hunt for the syllables. That is done. Or the end of like, if you want to cut someone off mid-sentence and you need like a clean D to end the sentence, you know, that's stuff that we're often doing at midnight.
I was Josh, I'll let you look up that link. I'm going to share a screen with folks that I shared this last week with the teachers, and Mike Conrad, the teacher at Royal Oak High School, shared this website with me, and maybe you know this one, Josh, Otter AI.
No, I haven't seen that.
Otter is it's a transcription service, and you can actually you can get it free. But I did a 4-hour interview with a friend of mine's father, and his the father, Perry Cicchini's dad, Paul, is a World War II grad. So I did 4 interviews with them, and he's got a strong accent, so it was interesting. But here's what you just upload the audio.
Oh, wow.
And then you press the play button. I'll make this a little smaller so it actually fits a little bit. But I just discovered this because Mike was kind enough to, but you just hit the play button down here.
Well, my name is Paul Cicchini, and I was born a long time ago on January 31st, 1924.
So it's kind of cool because it does the time code here, but then when you push edit, you can go down, and he's talking about, and those days Mussolini had everything under control. So I'm going to hit the enter key here, and it puts 26.
Oh, wow.
So it'll actually, so you can scroll through the whole interview, and then you could actually just create these little breaks. And then the cool thing is you can export it and do a search. So I had 4 hours of interviews, and I wanted to try to finish it in time for their 75th anniversary, which was coming up. And so I wanted to piece things together. Well, trying to sift through 4 hours of interviews and say, oh, somebody mentioned something about Normandy invasion. But instead I was able to just export the transcripts and then just type in search Normandy. And there it was at 3607 on this one timeline. And I felt like I had just fallen through the looking glass. It was, it was pretty cool. So Otter AI is that service if anybody wants to check it out. And it's really handy if you guys do interviews. And we have a lot of students here who do a lot of news production for their schools, and they often get probably people that talk a little longer than they need for a 2-minute story or a 3-minute story. And this is a really good way to do that. So, all right. So we got the video ready?
Yes.
All right. Let me see. The lost art of filling time as a teacher, right?
That's our lives now.
Yeah. All right. So let me share the screen, make sure I got the sound check on. Okay.
I remember thinking, God, just hold on, because somehow, some way this is going to make sense.
The reaction of people around me was just, shut up.
Anybody who has lost anyone through suicide, you always say, what did I miss? Why couldn't I save him?
Suicide. That's a scary word, isn't it?
I just always felt like an alien, like a burden.
I started to look for other people like me, and I couldn't find anything. Like, where were these people?
To say I'm an attempt survivor, even say the word suicide, is a record stopper.
I just want people to look into these people's eyes.
Because we've always looked away. You know, hashtag suicide so white.
My name is Leah Harris, and I am a survivor.
When I'm grumpy, I'm an activist. When I'm nice, I'm an advocate.
It's a project about suicide, but I'm focusing on life.
It's not the word suicide that is the problem. It is the deafening silence around it.
We lose 112 people every day. That's bigger than a small jet airplane.
I'm not doing well. I find myself wanting to hurt myself. And I just don't really know how to handle it.
The revolution in mental health is happening, and we are at the forefront.
Is suicide still an option for you?
I don't want it to be.
We're changing a culture.
More and more, it becomes clear to me that I am never alone, that we are never, ever alone.
What would you say to suicide if it was a thing, if it was a person? I'd say suck it!
This S word, it's only scary if you give it this sort of boogeyman weight.
I used to think, man, maybe life just isn't for everybody. I was done. And I was wrong.
I forgot I muted myself. That was really powerful, Josh. Did you do the trailer as well?
I did do that trailer. Yeah.
How much of the photography in that were you behind?
It's interesting because I got lost in the trailer actually because I haven't watched that in a while. I did a lot of the shooting for the movie, like maybe, I don't know, 30 to 35%. So probably similar in the trailer as well. Yeah,
it's an art too, making a trailer. What's been the reaction to the film? I know it's you guys brought it to Michigan a couple years ago.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when I'll watch it in an audience, a lot of the time there's less laughter than maybe I would expect, and like a lot of it might be kind of like uncomfortable humor, and it's not things that people laugh out loud at as much. So I feel like I'll watch it in an audience and be like, oh my God, I don't know like if people are like responding to this or people like falling asleep. And then like after, everyone will be like, oh my God, that was such an emotional film. And I think overall the response has been really great, and that people are kind of like, I'm very surprised kind of how watchable that was given the subject matter. And they feel like they know, I feel like suicide's a topic that a lot of people think they know about, because there's like so much stigma around it and lots of kind of myths. But then when you're really like engaging with people who are, you know, having those thoughts, I think oftentimes the way they conceptualize it is different than the way we do as a culture. Mm-hmm. Like I feel like we kind of see it as very kind of like seeking attention, and like people kind of make a choice, and it's really something that I feel like if people had the choice to not feel that way, they would.
Well, and I know it was very powerful when our mutual friend took his life.
Yeah.
You were in the middle of working on this film at the time, weren't you?
Yeah, I was.
And that must have been just really poignant.
Yeah, I mean, it was devastating. And I, before that, hadn't really lost anyone to suicide. So,
yeah. Yeah, but it's you got some nice feedback there. Taylor from Carlson High School wrote beautiful. Lydia wrote, I loved how you showed Robin Williams.
Yeah.
What was the decision? Because that must have happened right when you were pretty close to being done with it, weren't you?
It did, and unfortunately, I feel like any year we would have made the film, there would have been some prominent suicide to kind of put the spotlight on. But I feel like that like takes it to another level, just because he was someone who brought so much positive energy to our culture. And I think we put him in just like to show how that people who are struggling with this, like, you know, like Micah Green, who we lost, like you oftentimes have no idea. And they're like, they just have such a positive energy, and then it happens. And the issue is that people don't talk about it a lot of the time.
Yeah, and for a topic that is so universal, it's very unusual to know somebody who has not been touched by it somewhere or another. It's as an editor, what to leave in and what to take out has got to be a wrenching thing sometimes. And what do you, when you were going through and editing this for, Doug and Lisa, what was it like? How often did you guys go through different cuts of it? How, once a week would you look at it, or was it a?
I think I took probably about maybe a week to build a first cut. It was either a week or two. And we had the movie, I think, either fully edited or almost fully done at that point. So we watched the first cut. Usually, it's like I take a while to build like a first draft of a trailer, especially. And then after that, it was basically like every night we would do like another round of notes. And I think it was maybe a week or two of just like really intense editing, and maybe like 7 to 10 or 12 versions. And it changed dramatically, like very fast.
Yeah, I was going to say, does I know when you're gathering interviews, it can often send things in a different direction halfway through the production. I think like Michael Moore said that, Fahrenheit 9/11 was not supposed to be what it was. It was starting out to be a different thing.
Yeah.
And what would you say advice for students when they are gathering the initial footage, this primary resource, I guess, of information? What any kind of tools or tips you would have in terms of how to collate it all, or how to keep it all, or looking for themes?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you just said is really key in that, like, obviously you're not going to make a documentary unless you have some kind of passion about it. And I'm sure it's good to start with an idea of what you think you're doing. But then as you engage with the subject, I think it's really good to stay open-minded and realize that like the whole subject of the documentary could basically totally change. Like with S-Word, I know that Lisa Klein, the director, originally was intending on making it more about people who have lost people to suicide. And I think she realized that maybe the more engaging film would be people who have attempted and are still alive, because they kind of can almost speak from both sides of the issue.
Right. They've been to the brink.
Yeah.
Right. Any students out there, is anybody out there working on documentaries or news stories that you found to be really powerful, that you thought you'd like to share with Josh and maybe get his opinion or insight, or any journalists out there with that kind of story? I always tell people, Josh, remember the Mr. Walsh's "Nobody Wants to Volunteer" cricket chirper as a little,
yeah.
little keychain? Yeah. So some of my students bought that for me when I would say, okay, we got the JV volleyball game tomorrow night at 7 p.m. I need 5 volunteers to video record it. And everybody would be like,
Do you have that handy? Because I'd love to.
I still have it, yeah, and it's the battery lasted a lot longer than I did. But it's people are writing. I love documentaries, no questions. But Dick, go ahead. Why don't you go ask your question?
I'm sure that the documentaries are a labor of love, and the S-Word was extraordinary. We've all been touched by that, unfortunately. I watched The Bridge, I think, prior to that. Josh, did you see the documentary, The Bridge?
I have not seen The Bridge.
It's excellent. It's very life-affirming, despite the subject. It's excellent.
Is that the with Kevin Hines?
It's the one where the fella set up a camera with a telephoto lens to watch people on the Golden Gate Bridge who may be considering suicide. And
yeah, I've not watched that, but I've heard a lot about it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I was wondering whether you pick out the subjects in advance and then find funding, or whether an organization chooses you and says they'll find funding for you.
So far in my journey, it's been the latter, and it's been a lot of kind of working on the projects that have come to me through Doug. And just recently, I feel like it's gotten to the point that I'll have multiple projects and I kind of have to choose one, but I have not been in the position on any of these projects of trying to secure the funding. at most I'll like edit the Kickstarter video and then share it with everyone I know to try to get funding. But so I guess I'm an active participant in that sense. But I do ultimately want to segue a little bit more into directing, and that's going to mean that I'll be the one finding the funding, and possibly still editing, but that remains to be seen.
I'm really happy to be able to go through the list of all the documentaries on these streaming services and see how many are being made and how many of them are in my queue that I hope to get to.
I know. Yeah.
It's
It's an overwhelming amount of media out there right now.
Yes.
Given
But
that movie theaters.
it's wonderful though that documentaries are getting the attention they deserve.
Absolutely.
So the script you mentioned, the trailer you mentioned earlier, that was Rock Camp.
Yeah.
Can I pull that up? Is it on YouTube, or is it easy to find on?
It is in my email. I think it's on Vimeo. And I can send you that link if.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. Oliver, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I was kind of curious. So how do you like come up with like great ideas for documentaries? Like, where do you find those ideas?
I think it's just being patient and waiting for something to strike you as like, I actually want to make a film about this. It's they in my mind, they kind of come to me, and I think that's what I love so much about documentary filmmaking is like the idea comes from the world, and then you kind of just get, I feel like I have a lot of ideas. Like I have like a notepad of many right now, and I'm not working on any of them because I need to make money and I've been editing, but at some point I want to take a break and make one of those. And I mean, for instance, like my sister is a social worker, and just last week she was like, we need to make a documentary together about this formerly incarcerated lady who came to speak at her school. And she actually lives in Los Angeles, and she runs a whole organization to help people when they're out of prison, basically to like have a life after that and to survive. And I have her book. I haven't read it yet, but that may be the first documentary I direct. And how I came up with the idea was, I guess, just like listening to my sister and being receptive and being like, huh, that sounds like a great idea. And I mean, reading the news is a good source. But yeah, I think it's just staying open-minded and kind of waiting for that light bulb to click, and then it's taking the plunge and actually deciding I'm going to spend 3 years doing this.
Yeah, quite often the stories will find you if you're receptive, right? Yeah. Okay. So let's see, Vimeo. You said?
Yeah, Vimeo. Doug, we have so many emails going right now is the main issue. And he sent it on another thread that was unrelated to Rock Camp.
Doug's a busy guy, and he looks like he got waylaid for this one.
I guess so. That's surprising. We were just texting about this yesterday. I was very excited.
It's funny, my Zoom's been going now for 6 hours, 6.5 hours, and
oh my god,
my computer is slowing down, and I'm
like, Zoom fatigue.
Yeah, I'm hoping we'll see how it goes in the next. Any other questions about documentaries or filmmaking or Los Angeles?
Okay, I think I've got the Rock Camp trailer.
All
I actually have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
How are the film schools in Los Angeles?
I hear they are great. I think they might prepare you a little more than maybe University of Michigan to like carve out a career in the industry. Like I feel like a lot of the focus at University of Michigan was so much on the craft and about, you know, experimenting, like a lot of film theory classes. And I feel like I moved out to Los Angeles and kind of I knew how to edit, but I didn't really know how the industry worked. And I from what I've gathered, I think the schools in Los Angeles do a better job kind of practically of just like preparing you for that step. But the best way really is just to be out there and to experience
Be
it.
out there and have hands-on work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I apologize to the people for my microphone falling over continuously. It must be getting toward the end of our show. Hey, Josh, I couldn't get that Vimeo link, but we've only got about a couple minutes left here.
Yeah.
Tyler, you're our next student to ask a question. Do you want to go ahead?
Sure. So I was curious on how you typically get funding for your documentaries, and like because I see so many documentaries on Netflix and Prime and Hulu, and so I was wondering if the documentaries are funded by a studio or distributor like that, or if they're self-funded and then distributed after the fact.
It's usually, I mean, there's almost always a Kickstarter. A lot of the time you can get, like, you'll kind of launch maybe a Kickstarter to get enough footage to edit together like a sizzle reel where you have maybe like a third of your footage and you kind of put together a trailer like pitch reel to show people what the movie will be. And then ideally you get funding from a major studio after that, or it's just like more people, like depending on the subject. For instance, like for the S Word, we got a lot of money from families who had lost loved ones to suicide, just like individuals, and then organizations like centered around, you know, combating suicide and like promoting suicide awareness. So depending on the subject matter of the movie, I feel like there's special interest groups that you can tap into that aren't necessarily related to the film world at all that will help you get funding. So it's a combination of a lot of those things.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Josh, thank you very much. And maybe we can do another show with Doug when he's able to join us.
Part two. But yeah, it's been a pleasure. This was
I really appreciate it. Well, you filled the show fine, so that was awesome. So I really appreciate you coming. And thank you on behalf of all the students here. We're going to just stop for 4 minutes and be back with the Pierce brothers to talk about The Wretched, which ended up being the #1 film in America in May.
Oh, wow.
At the drive-ins, because the drive-ins were the only theaters open, and it was quite a niche. It was pretty remarkable timing. So anyway, stay tuned if you want to. You can join us for that too if you want to, Josh.